While everyone's talking about generative AI's potential, pioneers across industries are already rolling up their sleeves, taking a practical approach to implementation and learning vital lessons about what works and what doesn't. The key is in that word generative. This is the first technology in history capable of creating something completely new. Unlike previous systems that analyze patterns or make predictions, all still very important, generative AI generates original content, writes complex code, and engages in natural conversation. So this isn't just an upgrade, it's a tectonic shift requiring new frameworks, cross-departmental alignment, and methodical scaling from small wins to enterprise-wide implementation. Well, today, we are cutting through the hype with WWT's systematic approach detailed in their research paper, Building for Success, a CTO's guide to generative AI. Through real examples, including WWT's own journey with their AI assistant, Adam, you're going to see how organizations are choosing the right use cases, aligning technical capabilities with business goals, and turning Gen AI's potential into measurable results. To help us break this down, I'm joined by two leaders guiding organizations through their Gen AI journeys, Neil Anderson, VP of Cloud Infrastructure and AI Solutions, who helps enterprises build the foundation for AI transformation, and Mike Trojecki, Senior Director of WWT's AI practice, who guides AI implementation across multiple industries. My name is Rob Boyd. Welcome to WWT Presents Research.
WWT Presents Research.
Neil, I'll start with you. What do you do for worldwide technology these days, and how has AI affected your role in some of the stuff you're responsible for?
I'm the VP of what we call our Cloud Infrastructure and AI Solutions team. And what that means is that we look after all the pre-sales and architecture practices for networking, data centers, cloud, automation, and AI solutions. How it's affected my life, I would say, I feel like my entire work life has been AI for the past couple of years. So it's definitely affected what I focus on at work. I've spent a lot of time on AI. Outside of work, though, I use it to, everything from trying to draft communications to, creating some cool photos. There's a lot you can do with it.
Yeah, I'm having fun experimenting with that as well. Just a number of things with LLMs, just because I don't use it to write anything from whole cloth, but I love having it compare changes or be a copywriter. You're an expert in this area with these kind of things. And then I've got different voices that I like to sometimes use if I'm doing educational piece versus something else. And it inevitably gives me good stuff to build off on. And I've really enjoyed that. Yeah, that makes sense a lot, especially because you guys are right in the middle of it. And I assume that includes you, Mike. Mike, you mind telling us what you do for worldwide technology and how's AI treating you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I run our AI practice. So when it comes to kind of the business side of things, my team is focused on three areas. It's enablement, engagement, and our ecosystem. So really from an enablement standpoint is make our teams have the tools they need to basically sell, design, implement, and manage AI solutions. On the engagement side is making sure that our team is engaged with our field level sellers and our field level engineers to bring a skill set that may not exist in the field itself. So we're those specialists around things like high performance compute, high performance networking, high performance storage, AI solutions and software. Maybe it's the power and cooling side. Then the third part of the team and what we're doing is focus on our ecosystem, is really driving and building ecosystem solutions from our top partners. So when we look, AI, is it a technology area? Yes, but we need multiple partners that we work with to deliver AI solutions to our customers. So when I look at it from my standpoint, from both a work and a personal standpoint, my entire life revolves around AI, right? So you look at all the decisions that we make from a work standpoint, whether I'm trying to create even something as simple as an agenda for a meeting, to actually helping to build out a business plan for what we're going to be doing in 2025. I'm using a number of different AI tools to get there. Personally, it's fun to play around with. I get that. but it's also helpful in helping me in managing things like my own personal finances, being able to help my daughter with schoolwork, teaching her how to use things like, whether it's, ChatGPT or some of the, the Claude or Llama models, being able to help her use that and educate her on what's going on in that AI world. It's phenomenal, right? She's learning. I do a lot of fun things. I've been able to present to her class and some of her students, in their cohorts on what does AI mean for them growing up. So it's really cool. It's a huge part of my life, obviously.
Wow. Yeah, that's neat. Boy, nothing's more fun than going in and being the parent with knowledge and going to the school. Because none of us were the guys, I don't think you were, that are carrying in a gun or a badge or anything cool. But we know lots of stuff about the things that I wish I'd had in school, especially. But I like, I've never been very good at coding or scripting. I'm not an engineer in the formal sense. I just work with a lot of engineers over the years. And so scripting and stuff like that has always been really slow. And I've just started to really enjoy having a thread going because there's a couple of tools I use that I can do data view queries and some different things like that, and these text-based tools that I depend on. And it's just opened up the world of like, oh, okay, now this is easier again. And, and makes more sense to fit it into time I've got and stuff like that. And so just kind of having it as a co-pilot, certainly an abused term. So that's good. I appreciate both of you laying that out, by the way. As we get into this episode here, generative AI, which has kind of burst onto the scene and made everybody that doesn't work in technology, of course, think that AI is a brand new beast that none of us have ever dealt with. When in reality, worldwide technology, for instance, has been doing this for over a decade in various forms. But it is the LLMs and it's the generative part of this thing that deserves some focus, because all of a sudden it's put it rightfully or not, and I think rightfully, because there's no getting around it, that is out of the bag. How do businesses actually deal with AI in a practical manner with so many inflated expectations and so many kind of ill-formed thoughts and maybe moving faster than they should as a business? I'm really looking forward to getting into that more here. And so let's start with this, Neil. When it comes to practical AI, which is kind of how it's worded in the research paper, there's this notion of practical AI versus generative AI and really establishing measurable outcomes and kind of the way you'd treat any other kind of technology change or something you guys are working on. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what's driving the differences here in generative AI versus kind of practical AI, as you guys call it.
There's been a lot of attention and marketing hype around generative AI, right? It's really burst onto the scene. It is by far the fastest adoption of a technology, even eclipsing the internet or, PCs or iPhones, right? And so there's just a ton of attention on it. When we use the term practical AI, though, what we're kind of referring to is the notion of, all right, so you're playing around with things. Can you actually turn those into, true outcomes for your organization that have measurable ROI? And can you do that in a secure way so that you're not going to compromise your intellectual property, by putting it in the wrong places? Can you do that by, cutting through the noise of all of the different technology advancements that are happening on a daily basis with AI? So we bundle all of that into a little bit. It's kind of like a philosophy that we approach customer projects with that we call practical AI. How do I actually take all this energy, all this crazy technology advancements, but make it really practical and consumable so you can actually implement something for your organization that has value?
It's really hard, right, to try and compare practical AI versus Gen AI. You look at practical AI, it's more of an approach than it's technology, right? So it's really about advancing with purpose. A key element in this kind of AI journey, we talk about these things that are called AI studios, AI foundries, AI factories, right? You look at this and say, all right, especially from an AI studio standpoint, they're really valuable. What they help you do is set a strong foundation for your AI strategy and vision, but it's tailored to your business, right? And that helps focus on use cases. Like Neil mentioned, so it's really use cases, but you also have to address the security and governance piece of this, which are obviously both critical for AI deployment.
Yeah.
But this concept of practical AI is really about how you move forward. One of the most important considerations around building these is around that the security and governance piece, but it's really diving into the use cases and how they actually impact the overall business. If you don't start there and you're not looking at this kind of practical AI as vision and strategy, well, you're going to put yourself in a little bit of a hole. Use case is extremely important. I'm guessing that's going to be a big part of this conversation going forward.
Yeah, in fact, I'll go ahead and I'll put it up on the screen now. We've got this, and this is straight from the research paper, a practical approach to Gen AI. And out of these 7 things that you guys speak of in detail in the paper, we are picking out a few of them to go into a bit more detail. In this first episode, because this is a 2-parter, I do want to talk about use cases, but I also want to talk about how do we get beyond proof of concept. These first 2, which I think are kind of big because I've seen, at least some of the customers I've interacted with just minuscule compared to who you guys work with. But there's definitely been a thing of some people are starting off and maybe painting themselves in certain corners or exposing themselves in certain ways that may or may not even have become fully evident yet. And so I feel like this does deserve, you say practical, I can almost say pragmatic AI in terms of how we look at doing this, because this is what enterprise has to do. But I'm kind of curious, do you agree that some people or may forget that what's really special about this particular version of AI, when we say generative, is it because it makes things. It makes things, and we've never had a technology that does something like this. And I feel like it spells such a difference for, not going to get into where we may be going as a world, because it has such wide-ranging effects. But obviously the race is on, the cat's out of the bag. We're all taking advantage of it. Are there any specific things or warnings when it comes to generative AI that people need to be more aware of? Or have you guys seen any consistencies in regards to the client work that you do with people misunderstanding things?
Yeah, I would say the first and foremost, every client comes in and wants a Gen AI solution because there's just so much attention on it. Board level discussions, right? Every board in the world is putting pressure on their organizations. Like, what is our Gen AI strategy, right? We need one. But sometimes when a customer comes in, we discover that's not actually the solution to what they're looking for, right? It could be a computer vision solution, a machine learning solution, sort of classic AI. It could be digital twin solution. So first and foremost, we help them navigate into those use cases and say, well, what type of AI are you really looking for that's going to solve this problem? That's why use case identification is just super important, or it's going to, you could go down the wrong path. And every single solution or every single use case is going to have their own, own architecture, have their own care-abouts that's going to affect the AI workloads at the end of the day and what you're going to need to run them. It's paramount that you start with the use cases and understanding of those. Gen AI does create things, and it creates things out of data, right? It is not sentient, but, like some of the science fiction movies would like us to believe, it's not sentient, at least not yet. Yeah. But it's really doing, generating things out of data, whether those data is text, representing text, or representing pictures or even video. Where does that data come from? Well, a lot of it comes from the public domain, the base models, but the truly valuable outcomes also have to incorporate, organizations' data. And I think that's what's a little bit different about it, is a lot of the value that our customers are trying to get out of this, it's some of their most sensitive intellectual property, most likely. And so it's a little bit of the reward is huge. I think that's what's different about it, is the reward can be huge. You can get huge productivity gains. You can get huge creativity gains. But in order to get that benefit, you're also going to have to take a reasonable risk about putting some of your, really valuable data into that model to be able to generate those outcomes. So I think that's what's a little bit different about it.
That's really where the crux of the challenge too is that to really get the results that a business wants to do that would be something unique, well, all the models, we're all in the foundational models, I guess, we're all using a lot of the same things, and there's minute differences. Of course, there's specialized, fine-tuned models as well. And this is something some businesses do. It's the addition of that unique IP and that unique data that they have that both exposes them, but it also becomes that necessary risk. It's so funny because I feel like when the LLMs all came out and we all got excited because it was just burst onto the scene, post COVID, I bet every customer already had big projects they were having trouble funding prior to that. And now all of a sudden you've got something that you have to weigh in with all the rest of your priorities and say, well, is this where our best use of money is spent or somewhere else?
Understanding those use cases in relation to overall corporate goals is paramount, right? So without understanding, aligning to the business, without looking at the use case identification, without it, use case identification is really just, it becomes a task of futility, right? So let's look at a manufacturing company. Maybe they have an overall corporate goal of increasing overall profit by 2%. There's a number of different ways that they could get there. I mean, they could reduce safety incidents, production line downtime, increase or improve asset management, decrease the time it takes to respond to proposals. I mean, the use case piece, you have to identify it, but you have to align it to the business. And that is one of the things that I see coming from some of the customers that we've talked to, where you may have even as high as a CEO saying, we need to be doing AI. Well, okay, what does that mean? Right? What does that mean to you, and what does that mean to your business? Yeah. I mean, AI for the sake of doing AI, it's doomed to fail, right? You've got to be able to tie it to a use case that's tied to the business, right? And there are ways to get there, right? And you look at what we're going, and you look at this CTO report that we put out there. I mean, there are ways to start out, and you talk about the concept of an AI studio. You talk about aligning to strategy and vision, and we talk in the CTO guide about how do you actually start, and how do you start with use case identification, which again, like Neil mentioned, is absolutely critical.
This episode is brought to you by Varonis. Stop data breaches automatically, continuously discover and classify critical data, remove exposures, and stop threats in real time with AI-powered automation.
You guys laid out an 8-step methodology in the research paper around use case selection. You've spoken to a lot of these, but I don't know, as you're looking at this list, are there anything that kind of jumps out at you as saying, hey, this is one that gets forgotten about a lot?
You look at this list of these 8 things, right? And you've got to be able to get support and alignment from key stakeholders across the organization. There's just that's a key element of all of this.
Which is common to everything else you guys advise, right? Because I feel like every single show I've done for the past 5 years, 4 years, whatever it's been, has had some element of silo busting of how do we communicate, because we're not going to get real value until these departments, till security learns how to, well, security network aren't as distant as they used to be. But, those kind of things are present in a lot of organizational structures. And once again, here we are with another good business use case saying, hey, if you communicate a little bit better, you can get a lot better results, right?
Yeah, but think about when you're defining these use cases and moving forward and aligning stakeholders. People typically forget about stakeholders that are not technical stakeholders. Think about involving human resources, and think about involving marketing. If you're defining a use case that is something that is going to change your business, wouldn't you want a marketing stakeholder in there to be able to use that as a competitive advantage? Wouldn't you want an HR person in that room to be able to say, okay, we're trying to hire new talent, and if we can use the fact that we are using artificial intelligence and using new technologies to do our business, to do what we need to do, wouldn't you want them to use that as a selling point that says, hey, come work for us. Come work with us. We're using these technologies to be better, right? And so for me, you have to understand the impact that these use cases are going to make, right? Are they technically and operationally viable? How do you prioritize them? Define the scope. What are the success metrics, right? You've got to have all of these kind of pieces of those 8 steps, even down to like the data and being able to have access to clean data, secure data, right? Take those things into consideration, right? And the last point there, start small, right? Do this without fear, because frankly, it's not going to go perfect the first time, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to be in an experimental mode with AI when it comes to use cases. And having that lack of fear and being entrepreneurial is a key.
And probably setting up the right guidelines, the right bumper things I think of when I bowl. I need some things up to make sure I make it to the end. There's a refocus that I think people forget, which is the focus on understanding their valuable data. You guys are probably dealing with a lot of the same customers that you've been preaching that they need to get a better hold on their existing data structures. And the people that have done that probably are that much further ahead in being able to take advantage of these type of use cases, I would think as well. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And, Mike talked a lot about step one. And I think, I look at steps 2 there through 5, and they're very related. Often one of the stumbling blocks here is that you're going to be able to get hundreds of ideas about use cases. If you just ask the leaders of an organization, everybody's got ideas about what to use it for, right? The key is, how do I get those down to a very small number that I'm going to go and actually try and execute on, right? And key to that is, when we look at that, even ourselves, we came up with 75 different use cases without even, breaking a sweat. But how are we going to narrow that down to the 3 we're going to start with? And what we applied is really a framework of, all right, let's evaluate these in 2 dimensions. One is our data ready, right? That's one dimension. Do we have good data that we can actually start with, or do we have to spend some time, cleaning that up and cleaning up the data architecture, or transforming the data architecture to make it ready for usage? And then the second dimension is, what's the business impact? If we're successful, how much is it going to change our business, right? Is it something, and you'll find that, there's a number, when you plot those use cases out, there's a number that are just going to really float up to the upper right that you can get started on, and that are going to have a meaningful impact to your organization. That's why it's really important to kind of follow these steps when you're going through this.
We can come up with a lot of ideas, but it's hard to sometimes evaluate which ideas are more short-term attainable than others, or have more risk associated with them, perhaps. In fact, you guys did this. I feel like I've seen you change very quickly internally at WWT, because you speak about this externally, which is the RFP and is it Atom AI, I think it's called now, which had started originally as just WWT's chatbot or something, right?
Absolutely. And we started with the 3 use cases that kind of bubbled to the top for us were an internal GPT-like experience, right? Mm-hmm. That we could expose to ourselves. How do we digitize the knowledge that we've developed over the many years we've been working together, Rob, in our Advanced Technology Center? How can we digitize all that knowledge so that any employee could ask a question about what do we do? Do we have this technology? What are our conclusions about these 2 solutions? And they could get a really good answer, right? That was our objective with what is now called Atom, ATOM. Yeah. And it's producing some really good results. Did it always produce really good results? No. When we first started, we were sort of power users of that, trying to train it, and it would hallucinate. It would give the wrong answer. It was very, very confident about the wrong
That's
answer
the part
sometimes,
that gets me. Yeah.
Right?
I'm like,
and would convince you that, like, oh yeah, we are experts in this technology, and it's like, well, we don't even sell that, right? So we spent a lot of time training, going back to retrain the model, providing it additional data sources, making it really accurate. Today, it's really accurate. It's not 100%, but it's pretty good. And in fact, we're about to roll this out to let customers access this in early 2025. We're gonna make it external so our customers can use Atom. Second use case was around proposal automation. Very, very manual process. Taking tons of textual responses and plugging them into RFP responses. And then what we found is that depending on the human that was doing that, you'd get inconsistency. Depending on the quality data, different results of that. But by automating that, we did 2 things: improve the consistency, improve the accuracy to put those best responses forward that best represent us as a company. And the second thing is just the amount of toil work, taking that down from weeks to hours, has just been transformational for that team that creates proposals for us.
I had a brief flashback as we're talking about RFPs, because when Mike got on here, Mike and I know each other from previous lives, similar to these lives, but early in careers, 20 plus years ago, Mike. And I remember in the field, um, uh, really picking very carefully what RFPs I ever responded to as a salesperson, because half of them felt like trick questions, or they were written by another competitive vendor for me. Knowing if it was good for the company to even pitch this, and then all the detail you wanted. It just, when I heard you guys were doing this, I was like, that is tailor made for that particular process, because it feels so sticky. And then, and you guys even had like benchmarks in there for saying, hey, this isn't a smart business decision for us because of these parameters, which is also something, because you don't want to paint yourself into a corner saying you can do something that you shouldn't, or need more information on. Mike, have you had experiences with kind of small use cases building up to bigger?
Yeah, if you look at that, just to go back, the funny thing like about Adam and Neil talked about the hallucination piece of this. When I first got to WWT, I type in, I'd say, hey, who is Neil Anderson? And it would pop up and say, he's the janitor. I'm like, well, why is it the janitor? And I'd say, why is he the janitor? And it would come back and say, because he's constantly cleaning up all of your messes. So I thought that was a really interesting hallucination for
is it a hallucination,
internally.
or is it bringing things together that we just didn't see the pattern before?
Oh no, he was cleaning up my messes. Let's be honest. So when you look at it and you look at Adam, the RFP assistant, and the things that we've done to basically, not only for ourselves, I mean, we've been able to reduce the time it takes for us to get an RFP out the door by like 40%. But now our customers, find me a customer that is not responding to an RFP. Every business on this planet is responding to an RFP in some way. So being able to improve that process it's a huge deal, right? So when you look at like some of these smaller use cases, and Neil talked earlier on in here about, we're talking a lot about Gen AI, but talking about things that are computer vision or maybe safety and security related, right? Those are small use cases that can kind of blossom into really big profit savings for our customers. Or it could be, right, our customers look at a couple things, right? How do I decrease costs? How do I increase revenue or margin or profit? And how do I decrease risk? I mean, you can start with some of these small use cases and use those to start out, and it spreads like wildfire throughout the entire organization, right? That's this whole concept of, starting small, starting with these use cases, and then getting to scale, and then having adoption throughout the entire organization. And there's just so many things that we can do, and so many things that I will tell you, we're really good at what we do, Rob, but we're scratching the surface, right? There are so many things that AI is going to do, Gen AI and just AI across the board, machine learning. I mean, there's so many things that are coming that we just don't even know yet as an industry.
Yeah. Well, and I like that, because what I see you guys doing that I like is it's kind of learning alongside your customers. In other words, you bring a level of intelligence, you bring the exposure to multiple customers, both the pros and the cons that results from that, but also all the stuff that we forget about, which is that ultimately this, and we're going to talk more about this in part 2, so I don't want to have anybody worrying about when are they going to address build versus buy, and some of the and model choices and stuff. We'll talk about infrastructure, because that's that's very, very important, obviously, to certain use cases or to certain long-term plans, but it's also it's a risky thing, because especially like you go into the build direction, that's a rich man's game in terms of a rich person's game, because I feel like there's so many ways to do that, and there's plenty of people running after that. But there are a lot of new business models coming about. So we'll come back. I want to ask, before we run out of time on part 1 here, about getting past this proof of concept. Do you guys agree that, Neil, have you seen customers kind of wallowing in, we got to this point, we don't know how to turn it into, what we need to make this really useful for the business? Maybe we've proven it. Maybe I would assume that they've proven it, but don't know where to go next.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is just the low barrier of entry that we have, that you can go out and start experimenting with AI, right? You can go out to a publicly available chatbot for free, and you can go start experimenting, right? But you're going to deal with the hallucinations. You're going to deal with potentially the cost of that someday, right? You're going to deal with the potential of losing your intellectual property, and you put it out in a public model somewhere, right? There are real concerns there, but it's easy to get started. What's more difficult is how do you solve those challenges, right? How do I reduce hallucinations? How do I, secure my data? How do I move it forward so that 1,000 or 10,000 people can use that chat client, successfully in parallel and get the same experience? Those are harder problems to solve, right? So most of our customers are experimenting in some form, but they struggle to get that into production and solve some of those tougher challenges. And some of that is, when you kind of look at getting beyond proof of concept, to me, it is, I see some of our customers that are approaching it a little bit as a once and done. I'm going to do this project and then I'm going to have AI.
Oh, like security. And once I finish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what I tell customers is you really have to think of this as a living and breathing product. It's going to have a life cycle. It's going to have a need for strategy and continual update of the data sources to improve the accuracy. Just like a product, you're going to have to get continual user feedback. Is this accurate? Are you getting the things out of this model that you expected? If not, then we have to go and figure out how to improve that. Those are the tougher parts about getting beyond a proof of concept. But I'll tell you, it is entirely possible. We went through those challenges ourselves, and we know how to mitigate those. We know how to get you into a production mode.
But is that the right? Yeah, is that going to be right for them? And you guys know how to ask those questions. Well, as we wrap up and get beyond part one here, any closing points, Mike, as it pertains here to what we've covered so far?
No, I just on that last question to echo what Neil said. Right, it's that proof of concept. We've got these kind of 8 steps that we talked about before. Follow those steps, and it'll help you get to the point where you're moving beyond the proof of concept. Right, it's about setting up the success criteria in that phase, right? And monitoring and measuring it. You do that, you'll be able to move from that proof of concept phase and scale it pretty easily. But Neil had it right on, right? It's not a once and done thing. So continue to experiment, continue to measure the output, and follow those 8 steps, and you're going to be in a good spot for scale.
Yeah, I really like that, because I think I'm watching a few companies. I've been amazed at how fast you can iterate in this technology. I think it's very it's fascinating, and it's as exciting as it is scary. And it's kind of a combined feeling going forward, but there's no getting around it. And I love the fact that there's one company in particular, a group of writers that I follow, that not only do they write content constantly, but they churn out new tools on a weekly basis. And they're not perfect, but then they iterate on those tools and they get better. Now, that's not dealing with any kind of proprietary data, and it's a much simpler business model than most of our clients, customers are going to be dealing with. But it's a good reminder, I think, is the fact that we're dealing with something new and different. It does require a new way of thinking, but we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's still some very practical approaches that are going to make or break this, so that investments continue to move you forward and hopefully, keep you out of the risk chance of doing something that takes you backwards. With that, let's wrap up part one. Well, we've covered the essential first steps of practical AI implementation today, from aligning stakeholders and selecting high-impact use cases to methodically scaling beyond proofs of concept. Your roadmap starts with WWT's proven frameworks detailed in the report, Building for Success, a CTO's Guide to Generative AI. So please join us for part 2, where we're going to tackle the critical technical decisions, infrastructure requirements that match your use cases, navigating that build versus buy decision, and implementing security frameworks that protect your data as well as your IP. Plus, you're going to see how WWT's enterprise-grade AI infrastructure has delivered measurable ROI across multiple industries. So don't wait to start your AI journey. Now is the time to learn, to adapt, and to turn potential into practical business value.
This episode is brought to you by Varonis. Stop data breaches automatically, continuously discover and classify critical data, remove exposures, and stop threats in real time with AI-powered automation.